object-oriented version of what I'm going to show you here. So the first thing is let's okay, so this is let's see, files, I think it's called. Files, and I believe this will point me to something, but I'll find out in a second. And okay, so the idea is we're going to create this URL object, and again, we'll talk about what these exceptions are, you know, when we talk about exceptions. But and then again, the call is exactly the same as with a local file. So our scanner, I always do this, I close it first just because otherwise I'll forget. All right, so one thing we can do is, and I'm not sure if this is going to actually do anything, because I'm not sure if I got the URL correct, but we will see. And let's check each line while it has the next line. And we'll grab the next line, and just print it out. Just oops. All right, let's see if that does it. And obviously, if the URL isn't there, then it'll kind of mess up. And it turned out to not be there. So this is what happens when there's nothing there. File not found, blah, blah, blah. Oops, I said file 1. I think I should have just said file. Let's try that again. And it didn't like that either. I thought, oh, files, I think is what it wanted. Okay, so it found it. Basically, their pattern is they have files, and then each document has a number, and then they have different formats for them, and we're looking at the text format. So what it does is it has a bunch of, well, as you can see here, it has a bunch of front matter, and then it actually has sort of some text that says this is kind of where it starts, or in this case, kind of the starting. Again, the object here is we want to count the words in this text, but we don't want to worry about the front matter again. But the first step is let's again, I'm doing all this in main, but what I'm asking you to do is to do it in a more object-oriented way. So I'm just kind of showing you the some of the mechanics of what I'm going to ask you to do in a somewhat better way. So so let's okay, here I was just kind of making sure that I could actually find it. So instead of this, let's just grab the next word and add it to my sorted set. And so what's, as a set, it's going to keep them, it's going to automatically make them unique, in the sense that if I add a word that's already there, it's not going to add it. So, so this will give me the unique words, and then when I'm done with all this, let's just sort of see what we get. Okay, so the thing is that what we're defining as a word is going to be the stuff between white space. All right, and as you can see, we get some gobbledygook that these aren't really words, and furthermore, it looks like we encounter some kind of cruft and things like this. And notice that we can kind of see how it's sorting things. We see these are, this is what the string comparator does. So these are special characters, so it kind of puts special characters first. And then it does numbers next. And then finally, words that start with capital letters. And then finally, words that start with lowercase letters. That's what it does. Now, that may not be what we want, and in particular, what we encounter here are kind of words that have we have words that have extra characters in them. Again, this is something where regular expressions can come in very handy, and then we have stuff that just is not, like these are obviously section numbers and stuff like that. So there, what can we do with this? Well, one of the things we can do is we can use that replace all a thing of, so let's replace all, and we want a regular expression. And what we want to do is let's replace everything that's not a word, or not a W is not word, but I don't know. I assume that's W is a letter, and capital W is not a letter. So this says replace everything with nothing, everything that's not a letter with nothing. Again, a little crude, but that will okay. So that eliminates a lot of stuff. For some reason, it is not getting rid of the numbers. Okay. Well, I was replacing just one of them. So if remember, a plus says one or more. So what this should do is this should eliminate some of these other ones. But let's see. So again, as you can see, this is kind of an iterative process. And okay, so for some reason it's not removing the numbers. So what we can do is we can, where'd you go? We can say if you're, kind of one of these, not a word or not, or if you're a number, let's get rid of the numbers. So that should have gotten rid of the numbers. Okay. And now we're at least sort of seeing words now and not the other stuff. So that's, now there's it can be a little more sophisticated than that, because there are situations where we have contractions and there are things there that we can kind of use. You can kind of go a little overboard with that. The main objectives here are then to sort of take this kind of task, put it into an object that you design, or that I've designed for you, and implement that in such a way that you can. Well, the other thing is that this kind of includes some of that initial stuff. So if we, I think it was. So how? Okay. So here's the thing: is that now there's initial text that we want to skip over. So how can we skip over that? So one way to do that is to kind of read in lines until the lines kind of meet some criterion. So you remember there was that one line that said Millennium Falcon Edition. I must have been a Star Wars guy. All right, so how can we do that and deal with this? So here, let's go back to the has next line. Oops. And we'll read in the lines until they match this. Next line. Okay, so okay, so if it contains our criterion, let's break. That's one way to do it. Okay, so we're just going to read in lines until the line contains this criterion that we have here. And then, tell you what, let's just to just check to make sure that we're just. Sorry, I have real fat fingers this morning. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to see the lines go past, and oops, it sort of skipped it. Let's, where do we? All right, let's, here's our criterion, and let's, I think I misspelled it here, so that's, all right, so let's try that again. All right, so now, okay, so make sure you always spell things correctly. All right, so here I'm just sort of printing the front matter to make sure that I'm kind of getting to it, and then it finally hit this, and then skipped over. So we can then cut this out, and now the words that we're reading are just the words in the text, which actually include things like the chapter headings and stuff like that. And again, the idea, you can kind of, as you can see, sort of scrubbing text to get to something that you that you want to get out of it can be a bit of an issue. Where that's not really what the main objective here is. The main objective is to grab a resource from the internet, process it in some way, realize that you can't just kind of yeah, you have to do some scrubbing, but I mean, now how far you want to take this is kind of up to you, but it doesn't have to kind of go to the nth degree. I mean, as you can see, we're actually not we're using the lexicographic stuff, but if you remember, we have that alphabetical comparator. So instead of using that, I can now reuse I'll use my alphabetic comparator now instead of the lexical one, because that really kind of makes a little more sense. And so now, as you can see, things are kind of, and then we see, here's this additional thing. I mean, do we want to deal with that? Well, we can kind of add that to our list of things that we're scrubbing. And then you see some consequences of the case and sensitivity. So capital A and lowercase a are considered to be different words. There should be, let's see here, here we have about with a capital and about with a lowercase. Again, they're considered to be different words, because that's how the comparator works. If you don't want that, then you have to kind of massage the comparator a little bit to come somehow treat those as being the same. Again, we haven't done that. There's a little subtle thing here, and that is, notice that there's this blank line, and what that, can you think of what, is that just sort of an artifact, or is that something that's actually there? Can you think of what might be causing that? So you see what we're doing here. What we're doing on this line is remember we saw that there were some words that, if we, let's comment that out and sort of see what that was doing. Okay, we saw that there were these extra little characters that we didn't want to deal with, but there were also these numbers and things like this. So what is that regular expression? Okay, here's a word that we don't want to really consider to be a word. And what does it consist of? It consists of nothing but special characters and numbers. So if we replace all of the special characters and all of the numbers in this word with a blank, with an empty string, what will that result in? What will be the result of replacing all the numbers and all the special characters with an empty string?
Then I would have one entry in my set that just contains the empty string, and that's the first line.
Correct. That's it, exactly. In other words, all of these are going to, now not this, because that's going to leave the letter A, but all of these are going to result in an empty string, one empty string. And well, here I have, there will at least be 3 empty strings here, but then because the set, an empty string is a string. It's a string with 0 characters. That's a legitimate object. And all of these 3 will be converted into one empty string, or I mean, they'll each be converted into an empty string, and the sorted set is only going to contain one of them. So, and sort of an empty string is not a word, last I checked. So, how can we Well, what we can do is we can say if the length of the string is bigger than 0, then we'll add it, and otherwise we won't. Okay, so now that got rid of that one little empty line. Now what it's still producing, let's kind of go is the one little extra thing, if you remember, is that, and actually I think I have a local, yeah, so here's a local copy of the file. I was again going back and forth as to whether I'd have you download it and then do it, but then I decided, well, why spam your computer? Okay, so here's all this front matter that we want to skip over until this point right here, and then but at the end they have all this other stuff. So at the end of it, they have their little conditions. Okay, and basically here's sort of a text delimiter, as it were. Here's a line that signals this is the end of it. Okay. Now, the way I'm doing it right now, it includes counting all of these words, which we actually don't want to do. So, but that's, again, part of what I'm going to ask you to try to figure out is how can we not count this? And that's kind of what the design of the object, the class that I've asked you to do, does. Okay? So in other words, when, I mean, basically in terms of identifying what the words are, again, even though, again, notice that we have like 3 different versions of and, for purposes of the assignment, that's okay. That's, I'm not going to worry about that. But the main other little nugget that you need to solve is how to not count this. So we want to not count anything until we encounter this line, and then we want to keep counting until we encounter, where is it? Basically, until we encounter this line. So, and that's where, well, just one little, okay, so here we were going through word at a time here. So an alternative is if I go line at a time again, and I look at next line, and then what I can do is I can split it. I can split it based upon spaces, and then instead of doing all that, I can now go through the so now what I'm doing is I'm grabbing a whole line, splitting it into its individual words, and then processing each word, and then kind of doing my little adjustment here to get rid of the stuff I don't want. And so this should, again, this will work the same way, or at least it should. Okay. So we're pretty much getting the same the same stuff. But now I'm getting it line at a time, and then now because I'm getting it line at a time, I stand a better chance of figuring out whether or not I've hit this line, and I can do that in a similar way as I've done before. So, okay, so that should give you enough to